Do you want to give folks a few minutes to continue to trickle in, or do you feel like we're good to go?
We'll need a few minutes to let folks join.
So maybe at like 9:05?
Sure, yeah, that sounds good.
Giving people a few more seconds and then we'll call our meeting to order. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. It's 9:05, and I want to welcome you all to the September 5th meeting of the Oregon Housing Stability Council. My name is Mary Farrell, and I am stepping in today as interim chair, as Claire Hall has been excused from today's meeting. And as I step into the role of interim chair today, I'm struck by the importance of our work and the tangible progress we continue to make together. Our agenda today is very robust and reflects the ongoing commitment to housing stability across Oregon. By my count, we have more than 900 units of housing up for approval. That, in and of itself, is much needed progress for Oregonians seeking stable, affordable homes. There are clear points of connection between this progress and the shelter and language access topics that we will be briefed on today. The Council may recall that several months ago we heard from the director and agency staff as to their continuous goal of ensuring this government agency is responsive to all people of Oregon. And language access is one of the ways we literally meet people where they're at, helping us better serve the diverse communities across our state. Similarly, so is shelter, which, as a service provider serving rural communities, I know how important it is for the state to ensure ongoing support towards strengthening housing focused outcomes across Oregon shelters. From our housing development approvals to our language access initiatives, each item on today's agenda represents progress towards our shared vision of housing stability for all Oregonians. And as we move through today's discussions, I invite us all to remember the real people behind every policy decision: families seeking stability, individuals navigating complex systems, and communities working to meet diverse housing needs. And with that, we will take a roll call. Shayla?
Thank you, Councilmember Farrell. For the record, as previously stated, Chair Hall is excused from today's meeting as well as Councilmember Lee. Councilmember DeFantorum.
Shiloh, I see Councilmember DeFantorum is present, but we might be having a tech issue. Let me pause for just a moment and see.
Okay.
I'll note for the record, Councilmember DeFantorum is present, but perhaps a tech barrier is in the way, so we can keep going for now.
Okay, sounds good. Councilmember Farrell.
Present.
Councilmember Mena.
Here.
Councilmember Rogers.
Present.
Councilmember Harris.
Here.
For the record, Councilmember Meehan will be late today. Councilmember Willard. With 5 council members present, we do have quorum today.
All right, thank you, Shayla. Let's move into follow-up action items from the August meeting. Shayla, do you have any follow-up action items?
We do. We have a few here. Up first from home ownership, there was a question regarding lift home ownership unit changes and what our position and policy around prevailing wage issues were. And on the prevailing wage, we follow what is required under Oregon state law. Our current practice is that project sponsors must obtain a determination letter from the Bureau of Labor and Industries, which confirms whether their project is subject to prevailing wage requirements. Affordable rental housing regarding tribal investments. Regarding Tribal Housing Grant Fund, we plan to bring this topic to council for discussion in the spring. We are just about to launch conversations with the tribes about the grant fund implementation. For Housing Stabilization Division, the OEAP program and LIHEAP, there will be an update presented at the October meeting regarding this, as well as with the energy services. There will be an update in October as well. Regarding the 2025 legislative session, OHCS continues to build implementation plans through the process described in the August Housing Stability Council. The products of those plans will be shared in October with a focus of discussion with council desired engagement topics. That concludes the updates.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments from the council on follow-up items?
Councilmember Farrell, if I may just offer regarding the last item on the follow-up list for 25-27 implementation. Last month, at last month's meeting, we talked a little bit about what the process was going to be for building out the council pipeline. So just for context, there are more than a dozen things that the department will be implementing across the next couple of years, some in nearer proximity than others in terms of timing of that. The hope and expectation between now and October is that council will review the list of things that we will implement to see if there were particular areas of interest that the council might have. But all to say, in October, when we talk through in greater detail the areas that we are desiring and needing council input and interest in direction, that will be the primary focus for October. So we'll be talking through areas of implementation and timeline and policy and programmatic substance. It's at that time too that we will extract out and look for conversation and direction around the specific areas where the agency is either stepping out or expanding or doing something new that we will need your direction and support in implementing. So ahead of that October meeting, wanted to just put another plug in there. In between now and October, of course, we'll have some additional reminders and proactive work that goes out, but wanted to make sure that I took a moment to do an additional forecasting regarding implementation.
Thank you for that, Director Bell. Any other comments or questions from the council? Okay, hearing none, we'll move into the report of the chair. And since Chair Hall is excused from today's meeting, we will forego that action item and we'll move on to the report of the director.
Yep, thanks. I will yield today. We've got a robust agenda and I know folks are eager to get to it. So I will yield for today, Councilmember Farrell, and we can jump right into our first division's work.
Alrighty, so moving on to ARH, we'll now open a public hearing on the specific transaction cited on today's agenda, please. And Shayla, do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
We do have a couple of folks. Let me find them on the list and give them permission to speak. First up, we have Beth Hayes. Go ahead, Beth.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Beth Hayes with Community Resource Trust in Salem, Oregon. Thank you to the Housing Stability Council and OHCS for your leadership in addressing Oregon's housing crisis. Salem is Oregon's second largest city, growing faster than the state overall, yet with incomes 5% lower than the state average. More than half of renters here are cost burdened, and a quarter are severely cost burdened. The Salem Housing Authority has nearly 30,000 households on its wait list, 99% families with children, facing an average wait of nearly 5 years. Today is a milestone for Salem, with 4 new projects before you: Community Resource Trust, Joseph Street Apartments, Catholic Community Services Compass Points, United Ways Cottages United, and Community Action Agency's Gussie Bell 2. Together, these will create 378 new affordable homes in our community. These projects are not just about buildings. They are high-quality communities with research-based, culturally responsive resident services that help families succeed and remain stably housed. I also want to thank the City of Salem for its investments and steadfast commitment to these projects. With available land, strong public-private partnerships, and a housing production strategy aligned with state goals, Salem is well positioned to deliver housing quickly. Today's approval for funding reservation means families in our community can finally have a stable, affordable place to call home. Thank you.
And I think we had one more person signed up.
We do. Jillian Felton, please go ahead.
Hello, thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Jillian Siraj Felton. I'm the Housing Director at Community Partners for Affordable Housing, and we have 2 projects today up for your consideration. Jami Court, which is going to close at the end of this month. We are very excited to move forward on that project. It's 96 units of predominantly family housing, as well as Meadowlark Place, which is 104 units of senior housing in Beaverton. These 200 units will add to the community some much needed services, and Meadowlark Place includes co-located child care in a collaboration with Community Action to provide a head start on the ground floor. So both of these projects are innovative and new, and we're just wanted to express our gratitude for their consideration today, our gratitude to the entire team at OHCS for their collaboration, their work together with all of our partners to bring these projects to where they are now. And just wanted to say thank you for your consideration, for your time, and just to compliment the team at OHCS for getting us to where we are today.
Great, thank you for that. And is there anybody else who did not sign up but still wishes to make public comment this morning on today's items?
If so, please use the raise hand function.
Checking for that.
I see nobody else that has a comment.
All right, well, with that, we will go ahead and close public hearing and move into our transactions. And before we get started with that, I just want to pause for a minute and see if council has any comments they'd like to make. Councilor Harris.
Thanks. I just wanted to state for the record that I have a potential conflict of interest with all transactions and recommendations being reviewed in the ARH division today. The nature of my conflict of interest or conflict is that Holst Architecture is my employer. And while they have not been selected by the developer at this time for the projects or in the past, they could be selected in the future. And therefore, that's why I'm declaring my potential conflict.
Thank you. And Councilor Mena.
Thank you. Also, for the record, I want to declare a conflict of interest. I am an employee of the City of Beaverton, and I'm actively working on today's project, Meadowlark Apartments, which would directly benefit or detriment for the outcome of today's vote. To be certain, my role as a public official does not influence the outcome. I'm abstaining from discussion and voting on Meadowlark Apartments.
Noted. Any others? Great. Well, let's turn this over to Director Natasha Detweiler-Davy, Director of Affordable Rental Housing Division. Natasha?
Hello, Chair Farrell, council members, Director Bell. It's nice to see you today. Excited to be here with a really packed slate of projects to move forward. And so first up, we have two projects that are conduit bond issuances. And so I will hand it off to Ty to walk through those. I did want to just point out that there is in this, the formalized resolution document, which I think is on page 8 of the packet, and it is all named correctly, 9/5, but it erroneously lists today's date as September 9th. And so acknowledging for the record, today is actually September 5th, and that is when we'll be asking for consideration of the resolution. And so with that, I will hand it off to Ty, and I will share screen.
Good morning. Good morning, council members. I guess active chair, active chair Merrill, and Director Bell. For the record, Todd Unson-Strain, AD of Transactions, here to present Barber Apartments and Jami Court. First off, with Barber Apartments, just note the council had previously approved this project, but due to some issues with the cell tower, we're there were delays, so we are back seeking a reapproval for this project. There hasn't been any substantive changes since. But we're back seeking just at the guides of bond counsel. So with that, it's 151 unit project sponsored by Innovative Housing in Multnomah County. We have lift funds and 4% tax credits, and includes a range of unit sizes, and the total conduit issuance is over 39 million, and total development costs is over 73 million. Next slide. So Innovative Housing is partnering with a range of service providers, or IRCO, the Islamic Social Services of Oregon State, Black Parenthood, and all of these folks, organizations had been in the metro area and throughout the state of Oregon, serving BIPOC communities and immigrants and refugees throughout the state. IHI also is committed to reaching our MWSB targets, and they know what to expect, and have plans to reach the goals, and OHCS will be monitoring that progress. And then the next project is Jami Court, sponsored by SEPA. You heard public testimony a little bit on this, and I'll follow up with that with a little bit of background on the project. It includes permanent supportive housing funds, lift funds, 4% tax credits, and conduit bonds. It includes a range of unit sizes and affordability. Also our conduit bond issuance is totaling over 37 million, and a total project cost of over 65 million. Next slide. SEPA is partnering with two long-standing partners in the community, Hockey and the Urban League of Portland. Both have been serving the BIPOC communities, Black families, and East African immigrants in the metro area for long time, and there's an outline of extensive services and partnerships that is outlined in your packet that you can read further on, and I see one typo as I'm looking at this, so it's community partners and their general contractors commuted to the MWSB. I see a little bit. That's IHI is not involved in this project. Also, it's just community partners. And they are aware of our MWSB targets and expect to reach the goals, and we'll be monitoring their progress actively. With that, I'm happy to take any questions and ask that you consider the motion.
All right, Council, do you have any questions or discussions? I think those popped up at the same time. So let's start with Councilor DeFentorum.
We can't hear you, Sammy Jo.
Can you hear us? Okay, we can't hear you. Let's see here. Let's move on to Councilor Rogers, and then we'll come back to Councilor DeFentorum and hopefully gets unmuted.
Thank you, Chair Farrell, or Interim Chair Farrell, other council members. Thank you, Ty, for the presentation. So I noticed that there was a distinction between the MWESB targets. So for Barber Apartments, it mentioned that they were working towards the Metro Region 1 goal of 30%, and then the other project just said 30%. So can you give me a little bit more information about what the difference is? Now I can't hear you, Ty.
You're correct. So they both should read Metro.
Okay.
Metro third. Yeah, that sorry for that. They both should read a Metro target of 30%.
Okay, and is that something new? I just don't recall seeing, the Metro Region 1.
Councilmember Rogers, is it the region number, or is it so our MWSB effort does have regional targets, and so there's the 30% in the metro area, and other areas of the state have different scaled targets to them. Is it that you're curious about, or is it the naming?
Yeah, no, like I said, I just didn't remember seeing, Metro Region targets. I'm more accustomed to just seeing the 30%. So I was just wondering what the difference is. So sounds like it's been there before, and I just don't recall. So that's
it has, and I don't trust my recollection of what the different targets are. And so I don't know if Ty or Roberto, you have that inherent to you, but
not necessary.
Okay, thank you. And we can certainly follow up, and I think we have that information also published on our website, so we can point you do a follow-up with Housing Stability Council to send you the information on that.
Thanks. And so then the other thing I'm curious about, I know we've talked about the different developers and, you know, when we are introduced to these projects, you know, they're going to meet this. I'm wondering if we have information regarding prior projects as far as, you know, they said they were going to achieve 30% and they either met it or they didn't.
I think yeah, so we're actively I think there's I'll defer to Natasha and Roberto. I think there's a plan to give an update at a certain point. But yes,
So
we
you're
do
working on it. Okay, that's
yeah,
fine.
we do kind of chart their progress, and um we have a robust kind of reporting system and ex and you know our policy Love Johnson is it kind of shepherds that effort.
Okay, and then the last comment that I have, I was a bit concerned to see that for the Barber Apartments, there was an issue with the cell tower easement and understand that there's been a redesign, but I'm just curious as far as the health or safety of the residents in the area. I mean, being in proximity to a cell tower. So you may not have the answer to that, but that was just something that came to mind when, you know, it was talking about the delay in the redesign. Thanks.
And I mean we can certainly follow up with that, but I mean just context wise for cell tower permit, it was really more of getting all of the participants who own the cell towers kind of on the same page um where that siding of the tower, and they had two of the parties fine with it, and the third party and the IHI team did a great job in centering the tenants first and making sure that pretty much that there'd be minimal disruption because IHI, they're a long-term owner, so they're having that as top of mind, and dealing with just herding the cats with all the parties what took longer than expected.
Hey, Councilor DeFentorum, are we?
I
Yes.
don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. See, I have 3 microphones to choose from, and it's hard to test when I'm live. So thank you. Good morning. My question is similar to Councilmember Rogers on the MWESB targets. My question is, and I ask this all the time, are we tracking this? Do we actually know when people come in and they say, yes, we're committed to doing this? Do we track if they actually do that? Because it's very aspirational. I mean, it's a nice thing to aspire to, but are people actually doing the things that they say that they're going to in these applications? That's my question.
And it made me I will take that. And so in our June Housing Stability Council meeting and packet, you will find a briefing material that we provided with the details on that. And in there, and I also just put the link in I don't know who all gets it, but for council to this dashboard. So again, in the June Housing Stability packet, there's a briefing memo. We had a discussion, and time flies, and so I understand. But so if you look at website, you'll be able to find the, the data that we have. These are the regions that are established. And then if my scrolling works, there's a lot of information. Sorry if I'm scrolling. And so all of the different work and information. And so I think that we are actively doing and building and investing in that work. And I think if there's other questions that we haven't been followed up on before, I think there's the dashboard, which has both the data and the information, as well as the analysis and results of those investments.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I must not have been at the June meeting because this isn't familiar to me, but
No worries. Yeah, absolutely.
I will try and copy the link, but would you mind emailing that to us?
Sure thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Thank you. That's really helpful.
Great. Councillor Harris.
Thanks. I just wanted to say that for both of these projects, it looks like there's 4-bedroom apartments or units, and I just wanted to say how great that is to see those. It's my understanding there's a huge need in the market for that. I just want to acknowledge that. And then I also notice, and I could be incorrect here, but for Barber Apartments, just looking for some clarification on the in the summary, it says all the units are at 60% MFI, and then in the project description below, it breaks down the units further and says some are at 30% and some are at 45%. Could you clarify that a bit?
This is for,
Oh, sorry, for Barber Apartments, if I didn't mention that.
okay, so the unit, so all those unit sizes are I mean, the restrictions are at 60% MFI for for all those units are going to have income restrictions for for a lift 30-year term. So you're going to have all tenants need to be and have income restrictions on the property for 30 years.
And I think what she's saying is that in the narrative, there is a different assertion around the AMIs. Is that right, Councilmember Harris?
Yeah, that's correct. I think it's always
Okay.
great to see that 30% and 45%.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think
So
it is,
wanted to-
it is likely a case of the restrictions we are applying is that 60%, and then if they're using other resources to further buy down, is that what's
Right.
going
So
on
there'll be so those are our restrictions, and then they'll have 38 units will have project-based vouchers.
Mm,
So
got
those tenants, those tenants will be paying no more than 30% of their income
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
because of the project basing.
Got it. Okay. I know I've asked a similar question before during these meetings, so still trying to get my head wrapped around it. So thank you for explaining it further.
Yeah.
Hey, any other comments or questions from council? Oh, yes, Councillor Mena.
Thank you, Chair Farrell. Just a question in regard to the delay on the project by IHI. Do we know how much it cost? And I say that and I ask that because of the importance that we have on all the projects, that ensuring that we expedite the process and try not to delay projects. And we know that delay costs money. So that's the reason for my question.
So it's the cost of the delay to the project, given the cell tower and all of those local challenges navigating that. And so Ty, was there
most of that cost was kind of ate up in the contingency that that pretty much, but we can follow up with getting kind of an, kind of a ballpark, if, if it'd be helpful. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't, it wasn't kind of like a million, $1 to $2 million kind of swing. But I can follow up and get more granular on it if that would be helpful.
Yeah. And I think generally, I think that the point of, delays cost resources, the project is still moving forward with the budget that they had in place previously, but that those reserves and those contingencies are depleted. And I think, yeah, it is right in the scale of the things, it does remove future resiliency to other shifts through the development process. And so I agree. And I think that's a accurate point of emphasis.
Yeah, and again, my point in this is for all of us that are part of this process, that we're conscious of that, as we work on this project, that to do whatever degree possible, we work to eliminate or diminish all this that's delays, as they do take resources.
Great, thank you for those comments. Last call for council questions or comments before we move for a motion. Okay, well, can we get a motion?
So moved.
Can we get a second?
Second.
Okay, can we do roll call?
Thank you, council members. Councilmember DeFantorum.
Yes.
Councilmember Farrell.
Yes.
Councilmember Mena.
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Councilmember Harris.
Yes.
Councilmember Meehan. Okay, with 5 council members voting, we have passed. Motion passes.
That's awesome. All right. Looks like the next item on our agenda is the ORCA project recommendation.
Yes, great. Thank you so much. We are very excited to be bringing this. Late last month, we brought kind of the first round of investments with new legislative investment. And so Amy will walk us through the next. And then after this, I'll do a little regrouping on where we are with the ORCA. Amy?
Great, thank you. Good morning, Chair Farrell, Housing Stability Council members, and Director Bell. I'm Amy Cole, the Assistant Director of Development Resources, and I'm here to present this month's ORCA projects for your consideration. Just a little snapshot for where we are with ORCA applications or impact assessment applications, that is. We currently have 28 projects in impact assessment that are under review. 70 projects are in the impact assessment step. That includes 46 for-profit-led projects, 42 nonprofit-led projects, 9 housing authority-led projects, and 1 tribal-led project. Excuse me, 1 tribal-led project. And we have a slate of 10 projects today, so I will go through them one by one. And our first up is Allenwood Apartments. This project is 116 units. It's sponsored by NeighborWorks Umpqua and Oregon Human Development Corporation. It's located in Grants Pass in Josephine County, and the request is for $37,060,000 in lift. The ERJ highlights are that the Oregon Human Development Corporation partners with many service providers for mental health crisis management, jobs training, and employment assistance. All are culturally specific services for the agricultural workers that the organization serves. And NeighborWorks Umpqua works with culturally specific organizations to provide wealth building services to Indigenous populations. Next slide. All right, our next project is Bull Mountain Apartments. That's 74 units. The sponsor is Home First Development, and it's located in Tigard in Washington County. The request is for $22,645,000 in lift. This development will be enhanced by community support and input from a diverse group of culturally responsive service and referral partners to ensure support and success of residents. These include Friendly House, Elder Pride Services, and Cornerstone Community Housing. The developer's organizational goal is to surpass the OHCS MWESB targets by 10%. To help with this, they have collaborated with Rubiton Development Services and with NAMIC to improve their outcomes with minority contracting rates. Next is Chenoweth Affordable Housing. This is a 4% development, and just noting again that 4% low-income housing tax credit projects, the slides show the amount of 4% LIHTC and private activity bonds that are requested, and this is for informational purposes only at this point in the process. The Housing Stability Council will consider approval of these resources later in the ORCA process. Today, the resources being considered are the gap financing for the projects. So Chenoweth Affordable Housing is 76 units. It is sponsored by Northwest Housing Alternatives and Columbia Cascade Housing Corporation. It's located in the Dalles in Wasco County. The request is for $18.5 million in lift and a little over $2.5 million in OAHTC. And at Chenoweth, key service partners are Mid-Columbia Community Action, which is a nonprofit that supports low-income households with many services and will be on site at this project for supportive services for veteran families. And Mid-Columbia Center for Living, which provides behavioral health services on site. As well as the Next Door Inc., which serves families and Latinx community members. All right, our next project is Compass Points. It's 120 units sponsored by Catholic Community Services, located in Salem in Marion County. And the request is for $23,340,000 in lift, and this is also a 4% project. The 4 Compass Points partners providing services are Fostering Hope Initiative, Church at the Park, Centers 50+, and Salem for Refugees. These are leaders in providing culturally specific services for historically marginalized populations. The development team expects the primary language groups of tenants to be English, Spanish, Dari, Arabic, Pashto, Swahili, and French, with multiple service providers having multilingual staff. The necessary outreach and tenant-specific materials can be rapidly translated. Our next project is Cottages United. This is 15 units. Sponsored by United Way of Mid-Willamette Valley, and it's also located in Salem in Marion County. And the request is for $2,389,128 in lift. The United Way of Mid-Willamette Valley is committed to approaching all programs and services through an equity lens, as is evidenced by their organizational equity work, DEI agreement, and commitment to train staff, with a focus on outreach and marketing to potential tenants that are least likely to apply. And for Cottages United, United Way will be working with contracted resident service providers to ensure that culturally appropriate services are provided. Right, Flatworks Building is up next. It's 143 units, sponsored by SDP ODP Management. It's located in Portland and Multnomah County. And the request is for $26 million in lift. This is also a 4% low-income housing tax credit project. Cornerstone Community Housing will be providing services, and their services are rooted in a trauma-informed, person-centered approach that recognizes and responds to systemic barriers that communities of color often face in accessing and maintaining housing. Cornerstone's Healthy Homes model integrates culturally specific strategies into programming, staffing, and service delivery. The next project is Gussie Bell 2. This project is 60 units, sponsored by Greenlight Development, Seed of Faith Ministries, and Mid-Willamette Community Action Agency. It's located in Salem in Marion County. And the request is for $21,400,000 in lift. Seed of Faith Ministries is an established culturally specific organization that is the co-developer of the project and will provide on-site services. Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency will provide culturally responsive resident services through their programs, which include energy services, Head Start, youth services, childcare, resource and referrals, a resource center, and Nutrition First. Our next project is Joseph Street. This is 183 units. It's sponsored by Neighborly Communities and Community Resource Trust. It's located in Salem in Marion County, and the request is for $33,059 in lift. This is also a 4% development. Community Resource Trust has developed relationships with organizers and leaders who represent populations facing racial disparities, including Mano a Mano Catholic Community Services, the Mid-Valley Literacy Center, and Salem for Refugees. All Community Resource Trust projects address culturally specific needs and barriers through implementation of culturally specific services. Service plans are based on community feedback and input from culturally specific service organizations. Right, next up is Meadowlark Place. This development will be 104 units. It's sponsored by Community Partners for Affordable Housing. It's located in Beaverton, Washington County. And the request is for $10,625,000 in lift and $6,600,000 in PSH. This is also a 4% project. Community Partners for Affordable Housing centers racial equity, diversity, and inclusion in its mission, values, and internal policies. Its mission is to advance equitable communities and housing justice through developing sustainable and long-lasting housing, providing tenants with services for stabilization and growth, and connecting people who are unhoused with a place to call home. And last but not least is Quarter Deck Apartments. This will be 34 units, sponsored by Polk CDC and located in Dallas in Polk County. The request is for $7.7 million in Veterans GHAP and $2,737,978 in home. Polk CDC employs bilingual staff, has subscribed to a language translation service, and has a written language access plan describing how to provide services to people who have limited proficiency in speaking English. Polk CDC works with the Fair Housing Council to train staff and communicate its commitment to end discrimination and stand up for fair and equal housing for all. Right, so we've reached the end of the projects, and if approved for funding today, the projects will receive a letter of intent from OHCS and will move to the financial eligibility step of the ORCA. Projects will have 6 months to complete the requirements of this step and to move into commitment. In financial eligibility, a detailed development budget and pro forma will be closely analyzed by the production team. to ensure that each project meets financial and underwriting standards and to ensure that projects are leveraging debt and other resources that justify and support the state investment. The final award for each project will be arrived at through the underwriting process in the financial eligibility step. And I'm happy to answer any questions, and the motion for your consideration is on page 20 of your packet.
Thank you, Amy, for all that excellent information and exciting project proposals. Do we have any discussion or questions from the council? All right, Councilor Rogers.
Yes, Amy, exciting. Thank you for the presentation and all of the units. I don't remember Salem having so many projects, so it's good to see that they are on the list, and just like to say thanks and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the council? None. All right, well, I'm really excited that we're considering so many new units today. And so I guess with that, we'll call for a motion. And we are going to be approving these all as one package motion.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. Can we get roll call?
Thank you, council members. For the record, Councilmember Mena will be abstaining from this vote. Councilmember Farrell,
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers,
Yes.
Councilmember Harris,
Yes.
Councilmember Meehan,
Yes.
with a vote of 4, we do not have a quorum. This motion does not pass at this time unless we have a caveat of Councilmember Mena voting.
You did not call me, Sheila.
Oh, sorry about that. Councilmember DeFontorum, my apologies.
Yes.
Thank you. I thought that was odd for a second. We do have, this motion passes, we do have quorum with 5 votes.
Yay.
Yay. I think we should all be very celebratory of that. Okay, great. Moving us right along. Looks like we are up to our homeownership division section of our agenda.
Actually, Chair Farrell, before we do that, if I could just take a minute on the ORCA update.
Oh, yes.
Topic as well. It's not just a quick briefing. I'll just take a minute with it. I think so we, have adapted our processes over time, created as we have gone in and trying to invest in our transparency. And so I just wanted to take a moment to check in on, where we are in that and what it is that you just accomplished here today by approving this slate of projects. And I think very impactfully, of course, these are a lot of units. It is also really essentially fully subscribing our regional allocation of LIFT resources. And I think it's an interesting time and a shift. And I think where we are seeing and feeling the amazing benefit of the ORCA and the pipeline that's created. And I might just do a quick screen share here, because I think when I was looking back to think about where we would be right now had we not had the ORCA waitlist pipeline in place, if we had not transitioned our work to invest in the ORCA. And I think when I did that, I've been here a while. And so last biennial, we were working on figuring out the ORCA and our ways of working. But when I looked back to the 21 legislative investments, it was not until December of that year that we landed what resources we would offer for what. And so in this moment, 3 months into the new fiscal year, through the ORCA waitlist pipeline, we have funded over 1,400 units. And, that does fully subscribe the regional resources. And I think as I have talked to developers and organizations, I think this is tremendously exciting and also a bit of a shift. There is a different feeling around knowing that those new legislative investments have been committed to projects. They will be beginning construction this biennia instead of just getting a funding reservation. And there's more projects that want to be built. There's more projects that we need to be continuing to foster and support moving into that pipeline so that we can really begin to be ready for new investments and any other opportunities that we find to be able to fund projects as we continue to stand up new legislative investments over the next 6 to 9 months. And we'll hear more around those efforts in the future. But I just think, looking back at the level of complexity that we have really streamlined into the ORCA process is just, I think, an incredible success. And I also think, and I talked about that a little bit last month, where we are approaching our wait list, really approaching that as a pipeline and being able to add more of the nuance and of those complexities of it, and that not all projects are fits for all resources. And so I've added more kind of external identifiers of all of that. And I think that is all an investment in trying to have it make sense to folks. I also think I have heard impressions that means we've added new layers of complexity. And I just want to also just acknowledge that this isn't new complexity to the waitlist. It is trying to add more visible markers for navigation of that externally. And so our waitlist pipeline, as we publish that, we do a monthly update after our Housing Stability Council, and we are including both kind of the flags for what resources each of those projects are eligible for, as well as a literal note about the status of those projects. And I am appreciating all of the questions and curiosities that we are hearing about those notes, and are committed to continuing to improve and be responsive and in explaining what our words mean in that. And that might mean that our notes need to get a little longer. But I am really excited to be able to have that information available to everybody, and also to know that right now we're not spending our time digging in on every single piece of potential strategy of projects. I don't know, in this little one, there were, trying to look at which types of resources could fit big projects and tax credit projects and small projects and rural. And we've developed a system that has a place for all of those, and that there doesn't need to be a real heroic effort to figure out and navigate which place do I need to fit in. You come in through one central portal in the ORCA. And it's an interesting system that has a kind of resounding implications, but I think it really is in the investment in innovating the way that we do our work so that we are supporting development and community. And I appreciate the support for all of that, and congratulate the state on being able to have this investment at this point in time, knowing that we're going to be working towards actually starting to build these projects this biennial. And I think with that's all I had to say. Unless there's any other questions, and appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Great. We do have time to take some questions or comments from the council. Thank you, Natasha. Okay, not hearing any. Can just move our agenda along. So can we get into our homeownership division with Keeble Giscombe?
Good morning, Chair Farrell and prestige members of Council and Director Bell. My name is Keeble Giscombe, and I'm the Homeownership Director here at Oregon Housing and Community Service. We're here today to request a minor adjustment for Abbey Lot project. I would like to welcome our Senior Program Analyst, Ms. Jessica McKinnon, from our development team to discuss this project further. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Director Giscombe. Just one moment and I'll share my screen. All right. Well, good morning, Chair Farrell, Director Bell, and esteemed members of the Housing Stability Council. I'm Jessica McKinnon. I use she, her pronouns. and I'm the Senior Homeownership Development Program Analyst on the homeownership team. I'm here today with hopefully a quick administrative request for our Abbey Lot Townhomes development. Last year, this council approved this project for $1.6 million in funding between LIFT and LIFT Supplemental, and it's moved forward through underwriting and will be ready to close soon. Abbey Lot Townhomes is an 8-unit development in the Albina district in Portland, being developed through a partnership between Self Enhancement Inc., or SEI, and Community Development Partners, or CDP. It's the first homeownership development of a larger housing effort to bring Black Portland residents back to the Albina neighborhood, especially those who have been historically pushed out. To further that effort, this project is participating in Portland's North-Northeast Preference Policy. SEI is a culturally specific organization with a long history of working in Portland and the Albina area. Since 1981, SEI has invested $1 billion of services, resources, and support into their service communities, and home buyers in this development will have access to that wide selection of supportive services that SEI provides. Back in 2023, we also awarded this partnership a pre-development and capacity building grant to conduct a study on housing needs and homeownership models among Black Portland residents to help tailor this development to the needs of the community. After SEI and CDP selected the community land trust model, they invited Proud Ground, who is the largest community land trust in Oregon, to join the development team and provide support on that aspect. It's rare for us to see a complex development team like this on the homeownership development side. So through the underwriting process, we've worked hard to be as supportive of their LIFT model as possible, while still following all of the very specific requirements of LIFT homeownership. This slide shows a quick summary of the original roles of each organization. SEI is the current LIFT recipient and is serving as both project sponsor and developer. They also have strong relationships with the community and will offer ongoing services to the home buyers. CDP is co-developer with SEI and also serving as consultant on the project and the LIFT process. They currently own the land for this development through an LLC. Proud Ground will provide homebuyer support and serve as the long-term land steward and manager of the community land trust after the homes are sold. And also just a brief correction from the packet, Owen Gabbert is serving as the general contractor on this development. I apologize for not catching that error earlier. Some changes need to happen to make this project work. The biggest one is that LIFT homeownership requires that the recipient of the LIFT funds also be the organization that owns the land. The organization can't be an LLC. Originally, the intent was that the land would be transferred to SEI prior to closing, and then Proud Ground would take ownership of the land and assume all LIFT requirements after all the homes were built. However, in working with their attorneys, the development team has learned it would be much less burdensome and more financially feasible to just have Proud Ground take ownership of the land right away, rather than transfer the land twice. Specifically, this will save SEI legal expenses. Because the landowner also needs to be the LIFT awardee, this means that we also need to transfer our award to Proud Ground. And this slide is what that would look like. Other than the change in land ownership and LIFT recipient status, all roles and responsibilities are the same. The organizations are developing a thorough and legally binding development contract to enshrine those responsibilities and any profits or losses on the development. We're very comfortable with this plan. Proud Ground has other LIFT awards in partnership with other developers, so we're familiar with their experience and capacity, and they are familiar with our requirements. So today we're just seeking your approval to transfer this LIFT and LIFT Supplemental Award from SEI to Proud Ground. With this transfer, we expect that they'll be able to close in the next month or so and get started on construction. And with that, I'd like to say thank you so much for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you for that. Do we have any questions or comments from the council? Councilor Rogers.
Thank you for the presentation and trying to make it make sense, Jessica. But the question that I have, or I'm seeking clarity on, I think earlier you mentioned that normally the long-term steward generally is the landowner. And so I guess I'm just curious why it took so long for this to shake out, or why nobody asked a question beforehand. It just seems odd to me.
That's a great question. We did work this out at the original application stage. This was actually a new process that we were working to adopt to allow us, I guess historically, we have typically just had one applicant. They were the developer and the long-term land steward. In our attempts to be more accessible to more developments, we have opened up the process to allow for one developer to build the homes and then transfer that over to a community land trust to be the long-term steward, so that we could be accessible for more projects and place less risk on the long-term steward. This was, in simple terms, going to be our guinea pig on that. But in this specific case, as we worked through underwriting, and due to the current ownership not being with one organization and the next, it's just been a little bit easier to go the other route. That's not to say that our new attempt for accessibility is a problem. It just didn't work for this specific development. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, and so with the updated slide, it's indicating that SEI is still technically a co-developer, if you will, with
Yes.
CDP. Okay.
Yes,
Thank
so
you.
SEI will remain just as involved as they were initially. They still have all the same roles and responsibilities. It'll just be administratively, Proud Ground will take the lift loan, and they'll be passing the lift award through to the development entities, which is something they've done in the past.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
And Councilmember Rogers, I might just offer some broader insights that, well, you can determine whether it's useful to you or not. But over the last probably several months or maybe even a year, we have been sort of bringing different opportunities in front of council around where we are looking to try different things on in effort to motivate greater accessibility, less rigidity, and more locally driven solutions that are state supported. And that's been happening. You've seen a lot of that in ARH. You'll hear and have been hearing some of that in other divisions as well. You may recall within home ownership, over the last several months, one of the things that we had brought to council were, for example, areas within lift home ownership where there was specifically for leaders in our small towns and rural communities where the feedback, and this is not verbatim, is I get the aspirational goal with lift home ownership, and here is where it just isn't working for us in the way that it ought to, and the way that it could. And so we brought folks together to re-engineer several important details in order to make that tool, make that resource work better. And we're beginning to see that. This is sort of in the vein of that, where we at the state are wanting to ensure that we can better optimize and get greater flexibility in use out of resources by allowing some of our partners to develop and have different compositions of relationships that are going to both ensure and instill locally driven and community driven solutions in a way that isn't, for lack of a better words, just stuck in the one way that we've always done things. And so in certain instances, it takes a couple of rounds to sort of figure out how we move from theory to concept and practice and then make it work. And so I think this is sort of the manifestation of that, where the integrity and the intent of the partnership and the outcome is still there. And we're finding that there is just certain details that have to be re-engineered in order to not only just make it work for us, but to make sure that it is, from a longevity perspective, that it is both fiscally and from a composition of partnership perspective, that it is sustainable. And so just to offer sort of that broader context where this sort of fits in that, and where the council's probably going to continue to see more of where we're trying different things on. And I think part of our role and commitment is to also make sure that we're naming for council when we're trying different things on, what we're learning, and when something needs to be shifted, why it needs to be shifted, so that when you get something that like this that has red lines and crosses out, that you are on that journey with us of what we're trying, what it's doing, and then where it's working and what we need to do to make it work. So hopefully that offers some broader context in terms of connecting the dots of where we're trying to make resources and tools go further and work better.
Thank you, Director Bell, for that additional context. Yes, that's helpful. Thanks.
Great. Councilor Harris, you had your hand up a while ago. Do you still have question or comment?
Yeah, I don't have a question. I just needed to state, again, the nature of my potential conflict of interest for the record, if that's okay on this one. The nature of my potential conflict of interest is that Holst Architecture is my employer. And while they have not been selected by the developer for this project in the past, they still could be selected. I believe that's all I would say.
Any other comments or questions before we call for a motion? All right, can we call for a motion?
Move
So
to approve
moved.
the request.
Second.
Great, can we get roll call?
Thank you, council members. Councilmember DeFantorum,
Yes.
Acting Chair Farrell,
Yes.
Councilmember Mena,
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers,
Yes.
Councilmember Harris,
Yes.
Councilmember Meehan.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Great, thank you, everyone. All right, we're at that time in our agenda where we have the option to take a short break if it is desired or needed. We are a little bit ahead of schedule though, so if there is a preference to just move forward, we can do that, but let's hear from you if you would like to take a break. All right, everyone in favor of moving forward with the agenda? So like a thumbs up. All right, well, with that, we'll proceed with our agenda. Next up, we have Housing Stabilization Division with Liz Weber. And this will be to hear about our briefing on the statewide shelter program. Liz?
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Farrell, members of the council, Director Bell. My name is Liz Weber. I'm the director of the Housing Stabilization Division. And with me today is Danielle Bautista-Silton, who is our unhoused policy and planning analyst and who is the project lead for our statewide shelter program. And I will pull up our slides. Having an issue getting it into slideshow mode. Are you able to see it in this mode if I just keep us moving forward? Yeah, okay, great. So I'm really excited to be presenting information about the statewide shelter program today. This is an exciting and important project for our division. This is really providing the opportunity to move from what has been in past biennium an effort to fund shelters through different approaches and funding sources and to move that into a truly coordinated statewide system. The direction to have OHCS move this work forward came through House Bill 3644, which was passed this legislative session, and is also attached to funding that was allocated through our budget bill this biennium. So I will talk through both of those pieces, and Danielle will lead us through a discussion of our implementation planning. So this does just show more of a roadmap for the conversation today. I will walk through some of the background of what our shelter work has looked like leading up to this point, some of the work that was done through a shelter work group that convened last summer through the fall to provide some direction that then became the underpinnings of House Bill 3644. And I'll do a brief overview of the 25-27 shelter funding. Like I said, Danielle will bring us a little bit deeper into the policy intent and implementation planning. We also did a significant amount of community engagement around this project, and Danielle will talk through the structure of that engagement and some of the outcomes from those discussions. One important piece of structure for the statewide shelter project is that this work will move us toward a regional coordinator model. And as part of that, we will be holding a competitive RFA process. And so Danielle will also just give us a high-level overview of the timing of what those applications, when those applications will go out, and a high-level view of what that will look like. And then there are also equity considerations associated with this work, both from the bill itself and then feedback from the engagement that we've been doing that we would like to highlight for the council. And I will start with a high-level timeline of some of the important milestones of this work. So like I said, about a year ago, Governor's office and Representative Pam Marsh co-convened a shelter work group. I will go into that in a little bit more detail in the next two slides. But that work group met from August 2024 through December 2024 and developed a set of recommendations that then informed the development of House Bill 3644, which was introduced in February 2025, and then it was passed at the end of legislative session along with our budget bill. You can see in the timeline right now, we're between June 2025 and January 2026, which is our next really important milestone. The bill language did identify two very clear goals with attached dates. The first is we were instructed to have rules adopted by January of 2026. And then the regional coordinators who will be implementing the shelter funding in their communities will be selected and identified by May 2026. So this is a pretty aggressive timeline, and we're working very hard to meet that. And again, Danielle will get into a little bit more detail about what the specifics of that implementation looks like. So backing up just a little bit here, some council members will remember that before the last two biennia, the state didn't have a huge role in shelter funding. There were some important different exceptions there. For example, EHA and SHAP funding could be used to support shelters. Those funds went through the community action agencies, but there wasn't whole-scale statewide investment into something that looked like a coordinated shelter system. The level of investment and coordination really started to change with investments around Project Turnkey and the navigation centers, BAFI-NATO funding for shelters for the 9 federally recognized tribes in Oregon. And then moving into the 23-25 biennium, there was significant investment both through the executive orders issued by Governor Kotak to both create shelter beds and maintain shelter beds. And then there were 2 rounds of shelter operations funding that also were allocated in the 23-25 biennium. And just in, my description of all the different ways that shelter funding was allocated and went out, through the EO, the shelters were funded through regional coordination models. Like I said, the community action agencies had a history of funding shelter. And in the shelter operations funding, OHCS direct awarded shelters. And so there was this whole multiple different ways that we were approaching funding shelter in the state. And so this is the backdrop for the work that the shelter work group did together. The governor's office and Representative Pam Marsh pulled together a wide variety of stakeholders. This included some of the regional coordinators, local governments, service providers, the direct award shelters, a tribal representative, and that group met for several months to really talk about some of the ways that shelter funding had gone out that were helpful, and some of the ways that the way that funds were administrated made it difficult for regions really to do that local planning and to respond to the specific needs in their communities. And so the work group developed a set of recommendations that were really tied to some key themes that developed over the course of those conversations. So some of those themes, there was a particular emphasis on focusing on outcomes rather than outputs. So what happens with somebody as they move through the shelter system? Do they get housing? Focusing on that rather than just simple bed counts. Not that bed counts are necessarily simple in and of themselves, but that the outcomes were really important, and that equity of our outcomes were also an area that we really needed to pay attention to and put in some framework for accountability to those outcomes. It was also really clear in those conversations that there was a priority to maintain flexibility so providers could respond to the circumstances on the ground in their community and use their experience to respond to that. While there were some pros identified to the direct shelter funding model, really the group coalesced around this recommendation to move towards a regional funding model. And so this really is the direction we are moving as a state with the shelter funding, is to embrace the regional funding model and then build that out. And then finally, and another important theme coming out of that work group was that having consistent, predictable, and transparent funding mechanisms were incredibly important to the long-term health and stability of the shelter system. All the different funding sources that I talked about at the beginning were one-time funds. And so it is really hard to develop a shelter system on the basis of one-time funds that you really don't know how things will go the next year. So it makes it hard to plan for staffing and for continuity of services. So these themes and the resulting recommendations really became the underpinning of the development of House Bill 3644. This bill was introduced, and there are a couple really important pieces of this bill. Like I said, the overall orientation for this bill is that OHCS is directed to create a shelter funding model that is based on regional coordination. This is similar to what happened in the executive order with the MAC groups and the LPGs. But in the shelter system, there will be a competitive process where folks are able to apply to be the coordinator in their region. And that is the process that we're developing right now. Regions, according to the bill language, regions can be no smaller than a county. So that is the smallest organization of a region, but it does not give parameters around or prohibitions against any regions combining or putting in combined applications. Another piece that is related to the regional coordination is that regions will be required to develop a regional plan that is updated every 2 years. And this regional plan really requires the coordinators to meet with their partner organizations to develop a funding plan for how state funds will also be braided with other local resources or regional resources. There will be some goals identified in those regional plans, and they will really be based on the circumstances of those regions, but those plans will be submitted to OHCS and approved by OHCS. And those plans will be required to be updated every 2 years by the bill language. There was some also very specific language in the bill around rules development, and the rules will need to be in place by January 2026. And within the rules, there are some directives around identifying load barrier practices, identifying the funding formula that will be used for shelter allocations, and to define eligible shelter types and minimum standards. I think one of the notable things that came out of the shelter work group was a really robust conversation around the different shelter types across the state. And so an additional eligible shelter type that came out of the work group was safe rest. That was not previously one of the eligible shelter types that the state funded, but coming out of this work, that is now included in the eligible types going forward. And so in tandem with the policy bill, the House Bill 3644 policy bill, there was funding allocated for the statewide shelter system. It was about $205 million. That was about 6% less than we requested in our ARB, our agency request budget. Our ARB number was based on an analysis we did based on feedback from our partners about what it would cost to maintain the shelter beds we had in place for 23-25. And so the overriding goal of the shelter funding is to maintain the number of shelter beds, to not lose ground on what we had in 23-25 and prevent the closure of shelters. I will just acknowledge, very candidly, like with 6% less funding than we said was required in the agency request budget, there are some really active conversations about what that means right now, but we remain really aligned on the overall goal to not lose shelter bed capacity. And I think with that, I am handing things over to Danielle.
Good morning, council members and Director Bell. For the record, my name is Danielle Bautista Silton. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm an unhoused policy and planning analyst. And thank you, Liz, for an overview of how we got here today. I am now going to share how we are implementing the statewide shelter program this biennium to meet those requirements that Liz mentioned, where we have to adopt OARs by January 2026 and select regional coordinators by May 1st of 2026. We are implementing this program in 2 phases. The first phase, or what I'll call year 1, is from July 1, 2025 through June 30th of 2026. And the goal of this phase is to continue to fund existing OHCS funded shelter beds while we develop this new regional coordinator model. So this is a phase that we're currently in, and grant agreements are underway. Phase 2, or year 2, is when we would implement the new regional coordinator model. So regional coordinators would be operational by July 1, 2027. And July 1, 2026. To get to the regional coordinator model, though, we need to develop the RFA to select the regional coordinators, and which I'll talk about in a few more slides. Okay. So I'm really excited to share with you the work we've done around engagement. Our team wanted to engage key stakeholders in the design of this program as early as possible. And the purpose of the engagement was to solicit input on key program design, particularly on the new rules that House Bill 3644 required, and the program manual. We also wanted input on the request for applications. So we were thinking about questions like, what are the most important qualities of a regional coordinator? What has been their experience applying for grants through OHCS, and what has their experience been developing regional plans in the past? So we did early engagement in June 2025, before the bill was passed. So we can take that feedback and begin implementation as soon as possible. We also had a survey. We hosted listening sessions, and we partnered with MHAO with their Peer Apocalypse event as an opportunity for us to get feedback from individuals with lived experience of homelessness or housing instability. We had participants from the shelter work group that Liz mentioned, shelter grantees, so the MAC, LPGs, community action agencies, and shelter operators. We had culturally responsive organizations. We went to CAPO. We also talked to potential regional coordinators, tribes, and individuals with lived experience, really leaning in on who is going to be most impacted by this and how can we solicit their feedback. Overall, we had 99 individuals across all 36 counties that participated in the listening sessions. And then we had 60 individuals completed the surveys, and then 15 participants in the Peer Apocalypse listening session. Next slide, please. Let's see. We received lots of feedback in the engagement, and I'll go over really high-level themes of what we heard across all the groups and sessions. The first thing we heard was that shelters need additional resources to meet increasing standards. A recurring observation was that as shelters are required to meet more standards, they need more resources, infrastructure, and time to fulfill these requirements. And they also emphasized that the need for flexibility, allowing communities to creatively meet their local needs using the resources available to them. The next theme we heard was around minimum shelter requirements should include basic facilities and services. So we asked them, what are basic minimum requirements that we should have around shelter? And several participants shared that they should include bathroom facilities, case management, regular cleaning space to secure stored belongings, appropriate disposal of hazardous materials. Some also shared that while kitchen and meal preparation facilities, accommodation for pets, access to financial assistance to help with moving costs and securities were helpful and oftentimes necessary, many of them noted that shelter operators face barriers to getting that, including cost and infrastructure and providing those services. We heard that investing in staff is crucial for an effective shelter management. So they stress the importance of investing in staff to reduce turnover, aid in recruitment, and increase staff with lived experience or cultural competency, and just a strong consensus on funding training in areas of case management, trauma-informed care, crisis management, conflict resolution, and cultural competency. And then those in the Peer Apocalypse lived experience listening session emphasized the need on staffing to avoid staff burnout and ensure that shelter guests can access case management services and increase peer support. We also heard about the need for collaboration with health providers is essential for comprehensive support. Many of them expressed the desire to collaborate more with mental, behavioral, and physical health providers, and that they're seeing more shelter guests with medical and disability-related support needs, and that accommodating these needs takes more staff time and resources and the relationships to integrate with healthcare providers. We heard that equity concerns need to be addressed in shelter policies. So we asked about equity and what their shelter exit policies are. Several shared that their organizations currently have culture responsive and trauma-informed care when setting program rules and procedures. Most shared they are not or they don't know if they're using a racial equity lens to ensure termination policies do not disproportionately impact Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and others from historically underserved communities. And several shared that they are not doing a regular evaluation of shelter exit. However, most of them said that that is an area of interest that they want to work toward. And then when we asked about regional coordinators, what we heard most is the importance of experience, working with subgrantees, and strong communication skills, and knowing their community. So some shared that a regional coordinator should have a record of success in administering OHCS funds, staff capacity in place to make payments quickly to subgrantees, and then emphasized transparency, consistency, and clearly with documented requirements and strong communication skills working with subgrantees. Okay, next, I'm going to talk about the request for applications. So we mentioned we are developing the request for applications to identify the regional coordinators that would administer shelter services in an assigned region, no smaller than a single county, but they can represent multiple counties. Those services must be trauma-informed, culturally responsive, and primarily low barrier, aiming to reduce unsheltered homelessness and transition Oregonians experiencing homelessness into stable housing. So the regional coordinators would be required to work toward the following goals and outcomes. The first one is that they would need to ensure no net loss of agency-funded shelter beds for the region, and then ensure at least 70% of the agency-funded shelter beds in the region use low barrier practices with the balance available for recovery-based shelters. They would also need to work toward increasing permanent housing placements and reducing returns to unsheltered homelessness. And I mentioned earlier in our engagement work, we asked a lot about the application process and the qualities that they see are important in regional coordinators. So we've been working to ensure this RFA is accessible, that we try to reduce administrative burden whenever we can, and that the evaluation process reflects the needs in the community. So we try to do that by engaging really early on about developing this RFA. And we anticipate the release of the RFA coming up this fall, so very soon. And then the RFA process will have an organ buys component. And notice we'll go through organ buys, and we're also planning our own email notification to current grantees and others, including those who are involved in our engagement. And we will host a pre-application conference where we'll go over the application and answer any questions they may have. Okay. So next, I will talk a little bit about some of the equity considerations. So this program is using the racial equity analysis tool to help inform our program design and our community engagement strategies. This work is ongoing, but I'll share what we have done to date. So we worked with the Mental Health Addiction Association of Oregon, MHAO, to host that listening session, as I mentioned, really leaning in on hearing from those who are most impacted by this program. So we wanted to hear from those who have lived experience of housing instability or homelessness. We also emphasized the importance and aligned with the importance of equity within the RFA, in alignment with House Bill 3644. We also built a racial equity mapping tool to help regions identify and track outcomes by race and ethnicity so they can see where there might be disparate outcomes. And then we are incorporating equity as part of our evaluation plan, so we have a better understanding of where there may be disparate outcomes in shelters statewide. And then Liz mentioned that one of the requirements is that regional coordinators would need to develop a regional plan. Within that plan, we emphasize collaboration with those most impacted by homelessness, including those with lived experience and culturally responsive organizations and tribes in their regional planning. And then we also drafted as required by the bill too, a shelter exit policy that's intended to foster equity and outcomes. And then last, we identified areas where agencies are already working in equity practices and where there may be some room for improvement. Next slide builds on some of the equity questions that we asked in our survey. So I'm showing you is one of the survey results. So I know it's very small, so I'll try to read it, but we listed different policies or practices that the shelter work group recommended as practices that would improve equitable outcomes from shelter, and really intended to see that BIPOC and other underserved populations are not disproportionately going back to unsheltered homelessness when they leave the shelter. So we also asked this question because House Bill 3644 requires us to have this type of policy in place. We then asked the shelter operators or regional coordinator type agencies where where these policies or practices are currently in use, if they're in the process of implementing it, or if it has not yet been implemented, or if they're unsure. The blues represent higher responses and the reds are lower responses. And what we found is that overall, there were a lot of unsure responses. And then we also see that a majority of the respondents are currently implementing culture responsive and trauma-informed care when setting program rules and procedures. And more than half have clear documented information on the reasons for termination and a clear appeals process. Where we see some areas for improvement and consideration in how we design this program is the use of a racial equity lens to ensure termination policies do not disproportionately impact BIPOC communities, where we can have more regular evaluation of shelter exit data to assess for disparities, and a process to ensure documentation of steps or actions that were taken to avoid any denials or limitation to shelter services. So we are using this information as part of our program design. For example, I mentioned that we developed that racial equity mapping tool really to help regions and to help us identify and track outcomes by race and ethnicity. Next slide, please. Okay, so I shared where kind of our process for a two-phase approach, all of our engagement work to date, and that we're working on the RFA. Some of the other next steps is that we are in the rulemaking process. So our next big milestone is to get rules adopted by January 1, 2026. So earlier this week, just on Tuesday, we held the Rules Advisory Committee and heard lots of great feedback on the draft rules and program manual. And then we will have the public comment period opens up on October 1st and runs through October 29th. And then we're anticipating the rules process to be complete in early December. And then, as I mentioned, the RFA, we are anticipating releasing that this fall to select those regional coordinators. Okay. And I think I'll hand it back to you, Liz.
Thank you so much, Danielle. And that is the end of our planned content. So we are happy to take questions and hold some space for comment.
Great, thank you for that excellent presentation. Do we have any questions or comments from council? Councilor Mina.
Thank you. You have a great task ahead. First, I want to acknowledge that. That is, I mean, you've done a lot of work and definitely something that is needed. And my goodness, just like with the Orca work, it is, I equate it to something similar because it is a single integrated system, very, very challenging. So I completely support the work and kudos to you. And I know that you'll do a great job. My question is in regard to the equity emphasis, which I 100% support, and I want us to continue to do that. How does that work with the federal mandates that we've been hearing, and is that going to have any impact on that work?
I saw Director Bell came off. I'm happy to jump in,
Please.
So I appreciate the question, and there's nothing in the work that we are doing around the RFA process or the allocation of funding that gets on the wrong side of federal concerns around funding according to different groups that may be prioritized or emphasized. The work that we are really doing is to ensure that we are able to track outcomes according to disaggregated data, make sure that the policies that are in place within shelter are not disproportionately negatively impacting folks. And that's different than allocating funding according to a system that prioritizes one group over another. So I think our work around identifying groups and tracking outcomes and making sure that we have equitable practices, is in line with the work that we want to be doing at the state. And I think it aligns with where we understand the limits of some of the federal considerations are.
Yeah, Councilmember, I appreciate the question and certainly echo the sentiments of Liz. I think this council knows, just as we do in probably every single local government and community-based organization, that the world around us, one of the inevitable things is that it's always going to evolve and shift, and we will generally by proxy of being in public service, you're on the receiving end of that and figure out how you need to continue to be resilient while continuing to deliver on the things that the people of Oregon have made clear is a place of priority and concern. And this work is reflective of that. I think the shelter work that you heard today and that we'll continue to bring in front of counselors, in front of the council, similar to home ownership, similar to production of affordable housing, is grounded in evidence and centered on people and really focused on the end game, which is housing and making sure that we can connect people to it. We know there's a whole lot of different acronyms that cause attention. I think the good thing about this work is that it is both lawful and locally driven. It is, I think, responsive to the near-term concerns while also setting up a system that is thinking about not just the next 6 months or a year, but the next 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 years. And so the world today might look a little bit different than the world in the next 3 months and 6 months. I think you know that just as well as I do. And so we'll continue to observe and be resilient to that, while also not being distracted from the work that's in front of us that we need to continue to do. So as the shifts come our way, we'll continue to make sure we're in collective learning together, while also not flinching to every ebb and flow as well.
Great. Are there other council questions or comments? Councilor Meehan.
Thank you, Chair Farrell, and thank you, Liz, for the presentation. Really excited about the asking people that you're serving what really works and what they're looking for. Having the pet component, obviously bed bugs and those kinds of things are really important. And then the RVs. So I'm really excited to see that maybe that there's going to be some consideration for multiple different options for people in a houseless situation. My question was kind of similar to Councilmember Mena's about the documentation part. If you don't require documentation, then how do you know what people's backgrounds are for sexual type stuff and things like that? So I figure that there's probably some special oversight for that, but hoping that those kinds of things are being addressed, because it's a real difficult slippery slope there when you got kids and families involved and things. I also like the component that you are maybe considering kinship relationships. People on the streets live together, that's their family. And so just being mindful of people that you're serving, asking them to participate, and then hopefully the results will come out that some of those things are met. I really appreciate that work. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Councilmember Meehan. I think you're right. We didn't go into this in detail in our presentation, but in addition to the regional considerations, we did make an effort to invite folks running shelter and supporting shelter with a different variety of different shelter types. So folks who are running domestic violence shelters, youth shelters were invited to participate, family shelters, recognizing, just as you said, there may be some different approaches to the shelter guidelines and their own thinking about what keeps their community safe based on the population that they're serving. So we thought, that is a really important perspective to capture in addition to the regional differences that we were really interested in hearing back about as well.
Great. Any other questions or comments from council? Okay, well, I'll just offer as a social service provider working with the unhoused population, I certainly recognize that while the state has received increased shelter funding, it's been primarily one-time nature, and that creates some significant sustainability challenges. And what's encouraging is our shift towards community-based solutions supported by the state. So this collaborative approach to me is like bringing together local government, service providers, those with lived experience, and that's moving us beyond these temporary fixes towards real sustainable housing solutions. And I'm particularly pleased to see the emphasis on culturally responsive and trauma-informed care. So that's awesome. And it looks like Councillor Diefentorm has a comment.
I do. It's probably more of an observation. And I think this is really important work. I think it's important to everybody. That's a provider. It's important to everybody in general. I noticed in the survey responses around regional planning, there was mention of the, actually wasn't just mentioned, there's quite a bit of narrative around the challenges and barriers in doing this kind of work. And I think we saw this before with some of the homeless funding. And I think Director Bell will remember this. We were on a task force together quite a few years ago now. And it was really trying to, at least from my perspective, kind of unpack some of this. How do you break down silos? How do you ensure that the people that are, just historically not served, how do you ensure that you're taking down the barriers so that these are the people that are getting services? And I don't know that I don't know that this is the solution. I think it's part of it. I think it's a good step in the right direction, but I'm going to be really interested in seeing how this kind of rolls out. And really, does this really get to the issue? Are we housing, not just people on a temporary basis, but are we helping people to obtain, more stable permanent housing? And just statistically, what does that look like? Because we know what the statistics look like for homelessness in the state. And it is BIPOC people largely that are overrepresented in the numbers. So I find this really interesting work. I find it very complicated work. So thank you very much for the presentation and also for all of your work on this.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments, Councilmember Diefentorm, and it felt almost like decades ago, and it wasn't. It was actually pretty few short years ago. And I'll maybe just offer some very brief reflections, and really the bulk of this is led by, Liz and her really incredible group of folks with, of course, the governor and key legislators that are really helping to move and advance this work forward. But I'll maybe just offer a couple of quick reflections. One of the themes today from ARH to homeownership to shelter has been around really highlighting why process, rule, and policy really matters. Not just that they get established and what lines are set, but who gets to set the lines. And in many aspects, I don't think this is shocking, the state was setting a lot of those lines. And I think as we assess the trajectory of what is needed and where we need to go, I think that you and we are all sort of understanding the need for more robust and honest ways of building with community and community leaders. And we say that a lot and we talk about that a lot, and we don't always get it right. But I think both from the shelter process, if we look at sort of the last few years of how we did business regarding shelter or eviction prevention work, and it's good work. There's a lot of people whose lives were made better from that. I think we can also look back and see like, ooh, gee, we would have done that completely different knowing what we know today. And, you know, I think about the establishment of the ORCA, maybe in a different version of ourselves, we would have pushed that out and implemented it. Instead, we took over several months meeting with a lot of people to say, this is where you got it completely wrong, and this is what you need to focus on, and all those different types of details. But I think the blueprint for today is really trying to ensure that the facilitation of outcomes starts with community and understanding the conditions and circumstances of what providers are seeing and needing, and re-engineering policy, program, and rule from that, as opposed to the other way around. I think the last thing I could say, and I think there's a lot we could all say about this, is there is no conversation that we are having about the effectiveness of our homeless services system without understanding the backdrop of building more housing and all of the important economic factors that push people into those situations. And so, all to say, broad, complicated, nuanced, and our hope is that we go from having a collection of programs into a greater coordinated system that is not only reflective of the state, but where community and community leaders who are frankly doing the work from a local perspective see themselves in it. And so on the journey, I will commit that the council will be very close with us every step of the way. So appreciate the start of today's dialogue and all the work that the team is leading.
Okay, there's no other comments, then we can move into what I believe is our final agenda item for today. Has definitely been a robust meeting, and I think we're going to next hear from Director of Equity, Chelsea Bunch, on the OHCS language accessibility update and draft language access plan.
Good morning. Thank you, Acting Chair Farrell. Good to see you all today. Before I get started, Shaloa, if it is okay, I would love to just go ahead and share my screen and at least put our title slide up. And then I will do the good work of introducing our fabulous staff. Just a second. All right. Can you all see that? Okay. Awesome. Okay, let me get my screen together here to make sure I can see you and I can talk to. All right. Good morning. Really great to see you all. Good morning, Chair Farrell, Director Bell, council members, members of the public. My name is Chelsea Bunch. For the record, I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion here at Oregon Housing and Community Services. And it is always wonderful to be with you today as we prepare to move into the fall time, which I am very excited about. I hope you all are too. In February, we shared some exciting efforts being led out of our office as we continue to center and operationalize equity in the work that our agency stewards as it pertains to inclusive communications and language accessibility. We spent the last several months continuing to learn and to stand up robust language access services. Today, we're back to share what where we've been, what we've learned, and what's next. Also, as you see in your packet, we've shared a draft of the updated language access plan, which we will reference in our presentation. So stay tuned, and I hope you all had a chance to read through that. To start us off, I want to reshare a frame for our work that I shared back in February when we were with you last. Just a quick quote here. That language justice is the practice of ensuring that everyone has the ability to speak and listen in the language of their heart. You know, that language justice is more than just interpretation and translation. It is an intentional practice that values interpretation and translation as critical tools for opening lines of communication and empowering all voices. And so I want to remind us of that, and I want to again re-ground us in that as we prepare to share where we've been. With that, I'm super excited to introduce and welcome back our team member, Magda Bejarano, who is our Language Services Policy Advisor for our agency. She has continued to bring such a richness of knowledge, expertise, and experience, and I continue to just be really grateful for her leadership and the ways that she's engaged both internally, our staff, but also externally with folks who are oftentimes interfacing with the resources that we provide. So without further ado, Magda, I will kick it to you to introduce yourself, and you tell me when you're ready for me to advance slides. I got you.
Thank you, Chelsea. And good morning, everyone that is here today in this meeting, council members, peers, partners, and community members, if there's any of them with us today. My name is Magda Bejarano, like Chelsea said, and I use she, her pronouns. And I have the honor of supporting the agency in the program of language access. Like Chelsea said, I want to share some of the work that we have been doing in this last, since September, few months, to integrate the work that the agency has been doing in the past in this area. I think there is a growing need, growing interest in our community and partners and agency to advance this work. So I'm really excited to share today with you. And I want to start, Chelsea, thank you for handling the slides. If you want to go to the next slide, I just wanted to share a quick kind of context. And there's a word cloud in the screen with lots of languages, and all of those languages are spoken in Oregon. If you can hit the next button, Chelsea, there's some text coming up. So as part of this process to expand and integrate and better coordinate the language access work in the agency, we worked in an assessment to understand the need for services in the community. I'll talk a little bit more about that process soon, but one of the things that we found is that about 1 in every 6 or 7 Oregonians speaks a language other than English. And I always like to ask people, if you speak a language other than English at home, if anybody on your family, in your grocery store, your neighborhood, your community, you probably know someone. And this is just to say that Oregon is a linguistically diverse state. We collectively speak over 75 languages in Oregon. And there's the survey, the American Community Survey, which is the data that we mainly looked at, only identifies the languages that are spoken by at least 100 individuals. So that gives us 75 languages, but there are languages probably that are spoken by less than that. So that makes about 15% of Oregonians who speak a language besides English. And then of them, a portion, 5.3%, have limitations or limited ability to communicate in English. I think that is a spectrum. You know, people are in the process of learning English, and so that ability to communicate or understand well changes over time. That's the community that we are trying to mainly keep in mind as we expand this work, that spans across also many other identities and levels of need. And people who are learning English are also could be in need of services for shelters, rental assistance, home ownership. So this really kind of covers a lot of the areas, so all of the areas that we work in. And I just wanted to kind of set that in the background to understand a little bit of the reason why we do this. So the next slide, Thank you, Chelsea. Just has a little summary of what I want to cover today with you. And I want to give you a quick history of the language access work in the agency, also to kind of situate ourselves in where we are at in this moment. I want to share with you about the process of developing the agency's language access plan. And last, I want to give you a quick overview of the policies or guidelines that we hope are going to inform and guide, is redundant, but guide our work to provide meaningful language services for the community that we serve. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you. And this was even helpful to me to create, just to organize myself and understand the background of this topic in our agency. But OHCS has been doing language access work for a long time. I was able to locate the original language access plan that was created in our agency, and it dates from 2015. I think I should continue providing some background, but language access is supported by the Civil Rights Act that creates the right for people to benefit from public services equally, despite of their national origin, age, gender, etc. And language is one of those things that is part of our national origin. And the federal government created a framework to provide language services. And so, and with that framework came sort of a template to offer those services at the federal level. And it's the model that other local governments have been using kind of to yeah, as a framework to offer the services, sorry. So in 2015, the agency created the first language access plan, and it was sort of implemented mostly by the programs that were federally funded. And some of those guidelines and processes were adopted by other programs in the agency, but it really wasn't implemented as a whole. However, it started creating that culture in our agency. And I want to say in 2020, when the pandemic began, I think it became very clear for our communications department, our engagement teams, how important it was to make sure that everyone in the community could access information timely, especially information that was critical for safety, for access of benefits. And so the agency just started dedicating more resources, human and also financial resources to respond to that. And we created a lot more materials and information in languages besides English. And so through that experience and realization came the first request for language dedicated funds that could support the agency continuing to do that work and continuing to ensure that we were reaching out to everyone. And the agency received the first dedicated allocation for the last biennium, 2023 to 2025. And that was a very important infusion of resources for the agency. It allowed the agency to hire someone, me, in place to organize and expand that work, to lead that work. It allowed the agency to continue providing services to cover the cost of translation, interpretation, materials. And it also allowed the agency to review that original language access plan and renew that and reassess the services that we are providing. So that's where we are at today. Revising the language access plan, which we hope to implement in this biennium 2025 to 2027. We can go to the next slide. And just a few things that I wanted to add to that context for the agency is kind of the broader political and social context in which this work is happening. So like I said, a lot of this work has been kind of framed at the federal level, and back in 2000 is when that big framework was created, I should say. The Civil Rights Act precedes that by a long time, but the framework to implement that was shared in 2000. And very recently, early this year, the federal government has shifted that direction, making language services not required, although they are still somewhat or required by the Civil Rights Act, but there is a shift in how that is being implemented at the federal level. And that has an impact in how information about important services is shared with the community. So one example is the Federal Housing Authority has already decided to provide information only in English unless it's absolutely required that they have to do it in other languages. They have pulled materials in other languages off their website. They are ending language service contracts, not providing interpretation unless they absolutely have to do. And that just goes to say that it's a really important time to invest in services and of this type, and to make sure that immigrants, older members of our community that maybe did not learn the language or have not learned the language. I think of my mom, for example, refugees, that everybody can be welcome and have access to the information that can help them move on with their lives and settle. Okay. Now we can go next, and I think we can just jump into the thick of the presentation. And so just, again, kind of for a baseline here, a language access plan is a document, basically. It's very similar to our equity, diversity, and inclusion plan. So really, it sets goals for our agency, the guidelines that we're going to follow to accomplish those, and it gives our staff some implementation steps and tells them how to do this work. So that's what you will see in the draft. And the process to get to this draft started with an assessment of the services that our agency needs to provide in the light of the languages spoken in our community and who is using our services. And that led to us drafting some policies and procedures and the implementation steps. So if we go to the next slide, I just want to share a little bit of the process. And I think we have followed kind of the process that many of our programs in the agency follow to develop these. But I want to say that being the first time that we develop, or after 10 years, a language access plan, it has been really meaningful to do this in collaboration with a lot of our staff and community partners. And I want to highlight that while the agency, we OHS have some contact with the community every day, and we managed a lot of information. Our community partners are really the first phase for many of the programs, services, and benefits. So their understanding of the need, their experience of what's needed to communicate with everyone in the community has been really, really important. We began the process in September of last year, really looking for a partner that could help us organize this work and do it with really good quality, and help understand the need. It's very difficult to understand the need. There's so many angles and lots of data, and sometimes not enough data. So we went through a procurement process, and we ended up contracting with Portland State University, and we partnered with two of their institutes. One is the Center for Public Service. They provided technical assistance, and they've worked with us throughout the process. And the other one was the Center for Population Research. which was really, really helpful in looking at census data and making sense of all that madness that is the census data. They provided some really interesting tabulations to understand the specific languages that are found in our community and to organize that information by county. So it's really helpful for us to have the information in that way. And it's something that we now can make available to our partners also. And we began analyzing that data, organizing. We also looked at agency data that we have collected around language. Not every program in our agency collects information about the languages that are spoken or preferred by the communities we serve, but some do, and it's interesting. A lot of our partners do. And there's a growing interest to do that, but we don't have a really formal mechanism for that information to get to the agency. So that's a place of growth or coordination in the future. We looked at some of their data. We looked at some of our program data. We also looked at the use, how have we used our interpretation and translation contracts in the past to understand how often do we need interpretation, into what languages, what's the content that we are translating. And then we talked to our community partners to kind of hear the same from them. And I want to highlight here at the bottom the list of, I tried to identify the key collaborators at every stage of the process, just so that you can see who was part of these. But for this assessment, we, for internal teams, we have our business services team, strategic communications, community engagement, data research and analytics also play a big role. And then for partners, we had the Housing Authority of Lincoln County, NeighborWorks AMQA, Jackson County Community Long-Term Recovery Group, Dev Northwest, Neighbor Impact, Calumet and Lake County Community Action Services, the CAA of Washington County, Pueblo Unido, Apano, Housing Oregon, Point West Credit Union. And this is just to name some, but I really want to point out that we try to engage partners that work with different sections of our agency. So homeownership, rental assistance, and housing stability services. And we also wanted to include some organizations that serve culturally and linguistically specific communities in Oregon to just get their perspective. And one example is Apano. They serve Asian community, which is very diverse, and that was really great to have in our focus groups and in this process. And Pueblo Unido is an organization that serves, they actually have interpreters for indigenous languages of what is now Mexico and Central America. So very specific community and really good information about those languages in our state. Okay, and then the next slide. I won't go too much into detail here, but I just want to say that for the last few months, April to June, we have been, what we did is we took all that data from the census programs, partners, staff, and we tried to use that to determine what services are needed, what resources does the agency have, and how can we meet that need. So we did a series of work sessions with our staff to draft the processes and the policies that will guide our work. And we spent, I think, a good amount of time doing that. And that went into the next phase, which was assembling our language access plan and making that into one document or guide that will be made available to our staff, our partners, and the community. And I think that's really important, is that we want our commitment, our plan to be known by the community, because it's really a service to them I don't know that we have been very intentional in sharing that these services are available and how to access them. So I think that will be one of the sort of priorities, is to make sure that the community knows that we can serve them, that language is not a barrier. Okay, so I'll take a breath. And then the next section here is just to give you an overview of the language, the policy. If you can go to the next slide, Chelsea. And what I want to say is that, like I said before, our agency, OSGS, has been doing a lot of this work organically, and also because the need exists and because the will exists. So there's a lot of ways in which this was happening in our agency. What this does is really kind of organize it, hopefully, and make it a little more formal, which will also serve as evidence of compliance. And I have highlighted some of the pieces of this policy. So our first commitment is to provide the services. So it's not a choice, but we actually have an obligation as the housing agency to offer these services. And so that is kind of the first sentence in our policy. The second paragraph is a commitment to inform the community and make sure that it's not something that we keep quiet, but that we share with partners and community members. And then the third paragraph is a commitment to support and equip our staff to provide these services. There's nuances, right, in communicating with different communities, and we want staff to understand why this is important and to know who is here to help, what services they can use, and to have the tools to do that. And then the last piece there is that we are creating a mechanism for the community to communicate with us and let us know if they were not served in the way that they expected us to be served. If language was a barrier, if our translation was horrible, we want them to be able to tell us and to communicate. So that's our commitment, is to have that internal process to address concerns, complaints, and to get back to them with a solution. So that's the general policy statement. And this, I think, is about the last slide, but just like we have that general policy statement, there are some sub areas that we are addressing and creating guidelines for internally for our operations. And I just wanted to highlight those areas. One is notifying the public. And so our commitment, again, to notify the public and how we will do that. Basically, we expect to have access statements in our materials, our websites, publications, work with our partners to help them understand what's available. Interpretation will also developing guidelines around that. Translation is interesting because, like I said, there are over 75 languages that we speak. So to understand what information we translate when and into what languages, there's a process that we're going to navigate. We are following a standard provided by the Federal Department of Justice. And so when you looked at the language access plan, we have landed in a list of priority documents, priority information. We call them vital information. And this is information that is really critical to have for beneficiaries of programs. So information that can ensure access to our programs, so like application forms, notices regarding benefits and opportunities, any notices regarding opportunities to participate in public forums, in rulemaking processes, And then we've selected some languages to start with, which are the languages with the biggest, according to the census data, where we have the most community members with limited English. So we've selected some of those languages. We will translate it to any language if requested, but initially there's a selection, which we can get into that later. Our staff training also will have a process. And then last, we are committing to monitor this work, the outcomes of this work, and to be accountable to share what we are learning through this process. So we are setting kind of a time period of every 2 years. We'll revise the need and evaluate our work and the outcomes. Okay, so I think that's my last slide, and I know probably a lot of information, but you have a draft of our language access plan. We are very happy, would be really happy to hear your thoughts, comments, questions about that. And like Chelsea said, we will be back in I don't know if a month or two, but we'll be back to share the final version, and just so that you know how the work is going and what our next steps are.
Oh, that was so
Good.
comprehensive. Thank you so much. Comments and questions from council. Councillor Rogers.
Thank you, Magna and Chelsea. I really appreciate the education. I had no idea there were more than 75 languages spoken in the state of Oregon, and maybe I'll just need to travel more and listen. I remember when I had gone to London, one of the things I was most impressed with is that there are all the different languages being spoken. So I really appreciate the leadership and the lead that's been taken to make sure that everyone, no matter what language they speak, will have access to our services. So thank you.
Great. Anybody else? Well, thank you for that excellent presentation. There's no better way to communicate with our diverse state than meeting them where they're at and speaking their language, or having information available in their language. So that's a critical role in government reaching all Oregonians.
Councilmember Farrell, if I may, just before we close out, I appreciate all of the work from the team on this. And as Ms. Bejarano explained, what's interesting is we are right on the precipice of all things 25-27 implementation, and then all the other work. So if we think about 25-27 implementation as sort of the numerator, and then all of the other work that isn't maybe new or didn't receive new or expanded investments as the denominator, a big part of what we all talk about as council is outcomes, and those outcomes are predicated upon partners and people being able to understand that their government has services that are available for them when they need them, and then the connecting point there. And so our hope over the next few months is that as we are talking about implementation, that there are parallel points at which we're also talking about how the language access work is helping to ensure that those connections of programs and services are actually happening. Can you imagine going to a website of your public agency and the language that you need is not even available, but yet the services are intended to be there for you, and they're not even able to meet you where you are literally at? Or if you're in your community and you know that there's a local service provider agency that is helping your fellow neighbors out for any one particular thing that most of us has gone through, or we know people that have gone through it, and then that local entity is not equipped with the tools or capacity in order to have a basic conversation with you to understand what your needs are and to connect you to your services. I think most of us would qualify that as somewhat unsatisfactory, and that would probably be a charitable description of it. And so this is us really, and for lack of a better words, leaning on this team to really help steward those connections and help make sure that our interpretation and practice of government efficiency and making sure we're meeting people where they're at, that we've got a real clear plan in place for this. And like a lot of other things, we'll continue to learn and have trip ups along the way to make sure that we get it right. So as we work towards implementation, I think as always, we will make sure that we're bringing both the learnings and then what the feedback is from community as we are measuring outcomes and then implementation of this. So I appreciate the work, and we'll yield to the team and see if there's anything else before we turn it to Councilmember Farrell to close us out.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to add. Would just echo all of what you shared, Director Bell, and just want to re-thank Magda, who has really taken a huge lead on this incredible, I think, effort to make sure that we are obviously both in compliance, but also that we're really hearing from folks and adjusting and pivoting where we need to, and really creating a program by which our staff can be regularly utilizing the services that come connected to language accessibility. So just really grateful to be able to be a part of it. And as Magda shared, we'll be back in a month or two to share the final product and to continue to share with you what it is we're learning along the way. So a lot of appreciation and gratitude to you all. Thank you.
Councillor Diefentorm.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. This is super interesting to me. I noticed on page 14 above the table, it says the program served 78 Mayan speakers. I find that really extraordinary. And then 29 ASL speakers. What is ASL? I don't know what that is.
Sign language.
Yeah, it's American Sign Language, and it's the language spoken by people who are deaf.
Right. I didn't know that. Well, thank you.
Sign language.
Anyway, thank you very much for your work.
Okay, any final comments for today? It's a lot of complex and meaningful work happening to better serve across our state. And I just want to thank the staff for all of your excellent work, and thank the counselors for showing up. And for those of you who are in audience, wish you all a great weekend. And I will officially close the meeting unless there's anything else. All right, this meeting is adjourned.